Hello, today's video on Susie Makes is all about how you can make a rag quilt of your own, and at least the steps in order to make one anyway. Now, I haven't got a completed one to finish to show you, because the only one that I did have, which was a king size bed quilt, raggedy quilt, my sister took a liking to, and the rest is history, as they say. So I'm showing you what rag quilts are like in this lovely book, which I believe is still available on Amazon. Now, it's by Leisure Arts and it's called A Year in Rag Quilts and is by Annie Clapp. And inside it shows you all the techniques of how to make a raggedy quilt, and they've made 12 raggedy wall quilts. Now, I can't show you complete patterns, but I can show you some of the, like this one that goes through each month of the year. So this is June, the raggedy quilt. And with the idea of the raggedy quilt is that the seams that you normally sew like this piece here of the raggedy quilt they've got on show, the seam would have been sewn on the wrong side. Whereas to get the raggedy effect, you actually sew everything on the outside, and you then chop it usually 1/2 inch to 1 inch intervals along all of the outside seams, and wash it a few times to give it that roughly raggedy look and that lovely sort of rustic country look. And that is what I'm going to be explaining in a little bit more detail today. So that's June's. It also gives you some templates in this book. That's May's. There's April. And so on. I like to look at the wintry, Christmassy ones, so I'm just going to look at there's December's. It's even made a raggedy Christmas tree all hanging there. And November's all nice and autumnal. And October's with the pumpkins there because of Halloween. So you get the idea anyway. So I'm going to show you in a little bit more detail of how you can. There's actually a picture on the back of 4 of them as well, of how to make your own. Now, mostly these would be made on the sewing machine. This camera's not the best for doing panned out shots, and I'm not the best on the sewing machine, so I'm going to actually show you how to make it by hand. And but all the principles apply to if you decide to sew on the sewing machine. Now, this is what I have started making myself another quilt, raggedy quilt, which I will hang on to for me this time. And you can see I'm not actually building a pattern. I'm using just random vintage type fabrics that appeal to my eye and putting them together to make my quilt. Now, let's see. If I buy any fat quarters when I'm normally I go to at least 1 quilt show in a year. I try to anyway. And I try to buy fat quarters that are on sale, or I use fabrics. I might find something nice in a charity shop. I believe most raggedy quilts, at least in the USA, are made on a flannelette type fabric. And this is like I think we call it brushed cotton here in the UK. And not as easy to get hold of, but it can be done on 100% cotton. Doesn't go as raggedy for quite a while, but it does get there eventually. And so this is 100% cotton fabrics, and made up of sale fat quarters that I've picked up or I've been given by a quilty friend, or something nice and 100% cotton I've seen in a charity shop and picked up and cut out the best of the fabric. So got a nice Kidston type of fabric here, and a plain sort of two-tonal yellowy fabric there. And to me that one seems quite almost regal type tones of burgundy and gold in that one. And another Dixie flower print there. And shoes. Who doesn't like shoes? My lovely shoe fabric there. And this one, again, I've got this one, the theme of this one. Got all sorts of threads stuck to this. Shoes and handbags. But again, I chose ones with sort of vintagey look type shoes and handbags on, which are all the rage at the moment, I know. This is like almost like a Renaissance type fabric, with the young lady and man sitting there deep in conversation. He might even be proposing to her, who knows. And you've got the little sheep and the geese and ducks roaming around as they do. This one, I completely and utterly addicted to tea. I love tea, particularly Earl Grey, and I can't remember where I found this fabric, but I was so pleased when I did. It might have been at the last Maidstone Quilt Fair, which is normally every October in Maidstone in Kent in the UK. And it's got teapots and teacups and the names of a tea cosy there, and the names of all sorts of tea. You've got green tea, jasmine tea, lemongrass tea, black tea, chamomile, orange tea, my favourite Earl Grey tea. So that's my tea fabric. And this one, my favourite, I have two favourite flowers. One is I love freesias. I absolutely adore the scent, particularly of red freesias. Absolutely out of this world, that scent. And my birthday falls in the summer months, so I'm normally lucky enough to get freesias on my birthday as well. And roses are my second favourite flower. Absolutely adore them, especially tea roses. The scent is heavenly and you just can't beat it. So there's a nice rose fabric to go in there as well. Now I'll just show you the oh look, I was hiding one. That's a lovely cat fabric there. As I do have a cat. I love cats. My little Lily Bell. And it's got cats on this fabric with little fishes as well, and little apples, which I'm not quite sure why, but hey, it all looks cute. So I've just done a couple of fairly short strips to show you how they build together. And to begin with, smooth that a bit further out the way. To begin with, you need a template, and this is my trusted, very old template that I cut out all of my squares on my last raggedy quilt that I made. I cut out all of my squares from this template, which my kind daughter made for me, and just give you the measurements of it in case you want the same measurements. But that is 8 inches from the outside to the outside point, and the inside aperture, which you also need, is 6 inches square. So 8 inches square, and the inside is 6 inches square. And remembering that the seams are on the outside for a raggedy quilt, you need to place your template on your fabric, and with your pencil. I try and use pencils on lighter colour fabric, but on the darker ones sometimes I use an ordinary pen. It does take a slightly longer to come out of in the wash, but it does eventually. Most of it, however, is actually covered up by your stitching. And you draw around the outside of your template once you've placed it on your fabric, and then you draw around the inside, and you will see why quite soon. So it's worth making a nice, or buying even, a nice sturdy template. This is a cardboard one, and as you can see where I've used pens and I've tried to get the ink flowing better, I've scribbled all the way around it over. I think I cut out over, yeah, it must have been nearly 400 squares, considering you're doing the whole thing in one go, the front and the back of your quilt in one go. I think I must have cut out over 400 squares on the king size quilt that I made. Yes, lucky sister, I hear you saying. So and this is what, and then you cut it out, and this is what your cut out square will look like. And you also need to consider the backing, because it's all made in one go, so you don't have to make a quilt top first, then lay out your backing on the floor, then your wadding on the top, and then put your quilt top on, and then try and pin it all together so that it doesn't move around and ruche. So that's your top piece of fabric. Now for the back of mine, you can be a bit more frugal with your fabric on the back as well if you want. I'm using 100% calico cotton. Yes, I should have ironed it out, but I had to cut this quickly because I didn't have one ready for the video. Normally I would iron that out. But this is 100% cotton calico. It's very economical. It used to, back in the day, shrink quite badly, cotton calico, but it is a lot better now, and lovely for the back of a raggedy quilt, because it's not what I call a cold cotton. You know, 100% cotton can, especially in the winter, can feel a bit cold to the touch, especially when you first get into bed anyway. But for the backing, is a nice warm cotton, and it's not quite a brush cotton, but maybe heading towards that way. So will also keep you nice and warm. So you put that with the lines around the aperture of your template there. You put that face down on your table. Now your wadding, this is what you need the inside aperture of your template for, because that's the size of the wadding. Now I know a lot of people, especially if they're using brushed cotton or flannelette, however you know it, I think sometimes the Americans might even call it fleece as well, we'll actually cut the wadding to the full size of the template. But especially when you're making it by hand anyway, that's quite hard on your fingers. So I prefer to cut my wadding to the size of the inner aperture of my template, and my raggedy bits around my quilt will just be made up of the fabric then, and a little bit easier to sew. The nice thing with using cotton calico, you can hold it up to the light to see more or less where to place your wadding, as to centre it as much as you can. And just get there. And I centre it until the line of the aperture I drew on the front of the calico is in line with the or if you are using calico, hold it up to the light, and much easier. Sorry why I turned away to the window there. To then place your wadding in the centre. Then you place your top fabric on the top of that, and you have your instant sandwich then, quilting sandwich. You don't have to be that precise. So what I didn't tell you, which I should have told you before I went on to this bit, that's okay, I can quickly tell you now. Besides drawing the line of the inner aperture on your Raggedy Quilt square, you need to go from corner to corner and draw a line across one way and then the other way, so you have a nice big cross, which is your quilting lines in the centre of your raggedy square. This is the what will hold it all your sandwich all together. You need to do the same on the backing. You can use any fabric for the backing, you know, if you're using flannelette or 100% cotton, then it doesn't matter. You can carry on using your pattern fabrics. I just find I find it cheaper, if you like, but not necessarily looking cheaper, to use 100% calico, cotton calico. It's what I make a lot of toys out of, so I've always got cotton calico laying around. It's another reason it made sense. Right, I'll just line up my sandwich again. Excuse me while I'm turning to the window to look for my... That's it. So you do your cross corner to corner on both front and back squares, and then you layer your sandwich. So backing fabric on the desk face down, wadding in the centre, and your top fabric with your lines facing you, face up. Then you get some nice sturdy pins and you pin it together. And you pin, actually, no, you pin your centerpiece first, because you don't want that moving anymore. And if you have to wriggle the fabric about a bit to get the center, that's good. There, straight through the middle. Then you start and then you pin the corners. I don't usually pin any more than that. 4 corners and the centre, and then I'm ready to sew. And don't forget, if you are sewing on the sewing machine, you would know, hopefully, that your pin should lie that way, so your foot and needle have less chance of breaking, so it can jump over the pin easier. I might have to do this demonstration in 2 videos. I'll see how the time goes, because you may or may not know that uploading on YouTube can take forever and a day. So I'm pinning the second corner now. So you pin the corner, take your pin through the corner point on your top fabric, through the corner point on the bottom fabric, the backing fabric. Then you pin on, following the diagonal lines you would have just drawn, go on the back, coming through to the front. So there you have 2 corners pinned and the centre. I just need a couple more pins. Yeah. And pardon me. And there, that's how a pinned raggedy square will look. Now, you don't have to be too fussy. I know it seems like I am, but I am a bit anal like that, I guess, about making sure everything matches exactly, because your seams will actually be chopped, so don't worry. Now, at this stage, you would start quilting. Now, with quilting, normally I start in the top right-hand corner, and I do a running stitch all the way down, anchoring it with a little black back stitch in the centre. All the way down to its opposite corner, I continue the running stitch, and then I would go and do a running stitch from the other corner to corner. All the while checking that your needle is picking up along the line on the back of your raggedy quilt as well. If you find you're going off, straying off a bit, then lick your thumb, lick your forefinger, grab your fabric either side and give it a little wriggle until it's where you think it should be, and carry on sewing, checking that your lines are straight front and back. I won't show you the running stitch at this stage, because when you come to putting your quilt together, I'll just put that to one side for now. When you come to putting your quilt together, you would then do if you are making yours by hand like I am, crazy person, I know, then you would actually do a double running stitch to make sure it's nice and secure. I could opt to just double up the thread and do a running stitch, which maybe I might do when I come to show you, to keep it nice and strong, because when you think these seams, they're going to be taking all the weight of it. So I don't particularly like working in double thread because it's too easy to knot and can get a bit frustrating. But with this quilt, I think it's probably wise to double your thread or do a double running stitch, which will take more time, because with the running stitch, as most of you will know, if you don't, there is a video in this channel called How to Do Running Stitch, but it is just your needle and thread that you run your needle in and out, pull through, in and out, a bit more, pull through. That's like your quilting stitch as well, trying to keep your stitches nice and small. And then what you would do for a double running stitch is to turn round and go back the other way, but in all the little gaps in between the stitches you've just made. And that will make a nice strong sewn seam as well. But for quickness, I'll probably show you how to. I'll just double up the thread and show you. Right, so I'm actually about to start sewing this rose square onto the T-square, the teapot square. So let's move this out the way for a little while. So what you do is you pin it. I've already got my thread in there, so normally I would pin it in either corner, but with the second corner pointing along the top line there, and another pin in the middle to hold it together, making sure you're catching on the lines of the squares you're sewing together, both front and back. So your seam then will be on the outside like so. So you've got your top fabric, you've got two calico bits because that one and that one are sewn together, and then you've got the neighbouring fabric all together. And this is what will be chopped every half an inch or so all the way along, and then washed a few times to get that raggedy effect. And as I say, some people do make the wadding the same size, so they would have a bit of wadding in there as well. which actually looks very, very attractive, but I'm not really using, but by doing it by hand, that would be a bit difficult. I think that's much easier if you sew by machine. I just have a little bit of a phobia about sewing machines, so about machines in general, I should say. One day, I hope to conquer that fear. Who knows? So, let's just take that away. Let's start off by just securing with a couple of stitches. Looks nice, small, neat stitches. Now, your running stitch, I'll just show you one stitch at a time. As I say, there is a video in the Susie Makes Craft channel that shows you how to do running stitch if you need more clarification, because these quilts are very good for absolute beginners, I believe. And oops, no, I started doing a back stitch. That's not good, is it? So if you use your thread double, that will keep, see what I mean? It's already knotting. That's what will keep it the seam nice and strong. So all you're doing is making a little track of stitches all the way along your line, making sure you're picking up the line on the other side as well. So your needle goes just a little way in front of your main working thread and comes out. Takes a little bit of practice, but an equal distance ahead, making these little tracks. Now I'm just showing you one stitch at a time, but if you're confident with running stitch, let's take that next pin out. You know, you can do a couple or more. There's quite a lot of fabric here, so I probably wouldn't do more than a couple if I'm hand sewing. But if you were on the machine, you probably would have finished this by now. And this is the same stitch you would do for quilting your squares together, but you would use your thread single. So you just do. That's because this fabric is. My lines are not quite matched, so let's just move the fabric a bit. There, back on the line there. And normally my stitches are a little bit smaller than this, but I'm hurrying and not taking as much time as I should. Just keeping an eye on those lines front and back, making sure your needle is going through both. And it is worth it because it actually helps hide an awful lot of the pen or pencil markings while you're waiting for them to come out in the wash. Now, I do have a proper fabric marker that it rubs away you know, it is non-permanent. But I kept on rubbing it away before I'd even finished, and it was quite frustrating. So I use just an ordinary pencil or pen, but I don't use it. I try not to push very hard at all. Right, you're coming up to your corner, so you can take your pin out, holding on to your corners there, so hopefully they still match. I tend to put a little back stitch in when I come to the corner to secure it. And then maybe take my needle underneath that last stitch a couple of times. And then through coming out in between the two squares you've just sewn together. Well, in fact, I think I might just pop this, so I'll take it back to the front. Oops. Put a knot in the end. It's double, so I just do that once. So run it under the fabric. Careful not to go through to the other side. A little way. See, I've not gone through to the other side. It's worth checking that, or you have this great big stitch showing on the back. Pull the knot through till you hear it pop like that just did, and then snip close to the fabric. And that is how you do your running stitch when you're joining your squares or when you're quilting. Double the thread when you're joining the squares for strength, leave it single for quilting. It looks nice and delicate then. So that's how you join a square. Now to join a strip, once you've got a strip made to the width that you want, I'm just showing this way, aren't I? Yeah. Actually, make sure that all your seams are sewn in the same direction as well. In fact, I think, yeah, this is right. You see how these seams have been sewn so that they fall to the right. You make sure that you sew them together with the seams falling in the right direction. And when you come to joining your squares, always join them from the same side. So I sewed this with the square that I'm joining on the back of the ones that I had already joined. Now always do that, because and if I turned it round and I was joining it this way around, then this seam would fall to the left. So always make sure you join your squares in the same pattern sequence. And so we now come to joining. You do exactly the same stitch, which I won't show you again, but I just will show you how I think anyway it's important to pin it. You pin it accurately like you did before you started quilting. So you first pin will go, making sure your lines are aligned front and back, and you pin your corners first as we did before. And here we are. So go through one corner, out the opposite corner on the other side. Now with the second corner, I always pin straight down, quite thick now so it's not easy. Straight down this direction, so that tends to keep your corners together nicely, because as we all know in quilting, it's good to have as sharp a corner as you can get. And then you put one in the middle. Now you would use your thread double, and you would do your little running stitches all the way along, just as we did when we were joining the square. So you'd do your little running stitches all the way along. You'd anchor it with a couple of nice strong stitches, and then take your needle underneath those two strong stitches a couple of times, and then if there's enough, put a knot in it and pop it through underneath the top fabric into the wadding in the middle, just like before. If there isn't enough to knot it, if you haven't got enough thread to knot it, then take it through to the center of your top sandwich and just do a couple of little over stitches inside the wadding. It will stay because all this is being sewn. And once you've done that one, you then pin the next one. I would not recommend necessarily pinning all the way along. If you're sewing by hand, it can get quite painful, because you can keep stabbing yourself on all the pins, and I just think it makes for slightly more accurate pinning and eventually sewing if you do it one square at a time. So you would then pin the corner of the second square and the second corner of the second square, one in the middle, double thread running stitch all the way along to the end, secure with a couple of stitches on the end, then take your thread underneath those couple of stitches a couple of times, knot and pop through the center of your sandwich until it pops like I showed you earlier. If you haven't got enough to knot it, take it into the center of your top sandwich, couple of little stitches around the wadding in the middle, and snip. Now you do this for the entire project, your Raggedy Quilt project, and as you can see here, I've just started to do the snipping, roughly half an inch along. Now you can be anal and measure your, as I can have a tendency to be at times, and measure your, should have got some better scissors actually, bought some in, half inches all the way along, but I just tend to do it by eye. Adds to the country rustic look. Now you don't cut all the way down, as you can see here. I've left about a quarter of an inch or a centimetre, depending on your measuring preferences. Yeah, about a centimetre I've left. You cut about a centimetre away from the seam line. Yeah, that's a quarter of an inch. So a quarter of an inch or about a centimetre away from the seam line. Don't cut right down to where you've sewn along the seam line there, because then you do risk it coming undone. And you just snip like so. Now then you would need to, once you've done your snipping, and just a word on a little bit more of a word on sewing before I move on. Don't forget to sew your side seams all the way around the edging of your Raggedy Quilt. So you need to do that all the way around. You would need to do your double thread again and your running stitches all the way around the outside edges of your quilt, because you also do the 1/2 inch or so snipping all the way around the edging as well. So that is in essence how you would construct a raggedy quilt. I hope you've enjoyed this. I absolutely adore raggedy quilt making. It's my favourite form of quilt making. I've never really that much of a talented quilter, but I tend to feel it when I've made a raggedy quilt. I feel quite pleased with myself. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Do give it a go, whether you hand sew like this crazy lady does, or whether you sew on the sewing machine. You'd knock it up in no time. Enjoy what you're doing anyway. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and see you again soon. Bye for now.